The door to Matthew Henry's quarters hisses open, revealing an unexpected sight that immediately connects to the story's provocative title. An Orion female kneels on the floor, her green skin glistening under the ambient lighting of the space station Harmony. Her eyes lock onto Matthew's, filled with an unsettling mix of subservience and desire. "Let me please you now, human," she says, her voice a throaty purr that sends a shiver down Matthew's spine. Matthew freezes in the doorway, his diplomatic training warring with his instinctive response to the alien's advance. He's faced countless challenges as the human representative on this interstellar outpost, but nothing in his experience has prepared him for this. "I'm Rhea," the Orion continues, crawling towards him with feline grace. "I've been assigned to serve you in any way you desire." Matthew steps back, his mind racing. The implications of this scenario could shatter the delicate balance of human-alien relations he's worked so hard to maintain. He opens his mouth to speak to establish some semblance of professional decorum when a deafening alarm cuts through the air. Red emergency lights bathe the corridor in an ominous glow. Matthew's comm unit crackles to life, spewing fragmented reports of a security breach. His responsibilities crash down upon him, momentarily overshadowing the bizarre situation in his quarters. "I have to go," he says, turning towards the door. Rhea lunges forward, wrapping her arms around his legs. "Please, let me help. I can be useful." Matthew attempts to disentangle himself, but Rhea's grip is surprisingly strong. The alarms continue to blare, each second that passes potentially costing lives. With a frustrated grunt, he relents. "Fine, come on, but stay close and do exactly as I say." They rush through the chaos-filled corridors of Harmony Station. Crew members of various species scramble to their emergency stations, fear evident in their alien features. Matthew's mind races, analyzing potential threats and formulating diplomatic responses. As they approach the command center, a chilling message echoes through the station's speakers. "Attention, Harmony Station. This is Commander Zex of the Orion Liberation Front. Surrender all human personnel immediately, or we will destroy this station and everyone on it." Matthew's blood runs cold. He glances at Rhea, whose green skin has paled considerably. "You know something about this," he states, not a question but a certainty. Rhea nods, her eyes wide with fear and something else. "I have information that could help, but..." She hesitates, then continues in a rush. "I will only share it if you allow me to serve you fully, as is my purpose." The implications of her offer hang in the air between them. Matthew's mind reels, caught between his duty to protect the station and its inhabitants, and the moral quandary of exploiting Rhea's subservient nature. The fate of Harmony Station, and possibly human-Orion relations as a whole, rests on his next decision. As they enter the command center, alarms still blaring and screens displaying the approaching hostile ships, Matthew knows he's out of time. He must navigate this crisis, balance the competing demands of duty and ethics, and somehow find a way to save everyone aboard Harmony Station, all while dealing with an alien Maid who seems determined to complicate matters in the most personal way possible. The eyes of the command staff turn to him, human and alien alike, all silently asking the same question. "What now, Diplomat Henry?" Matthew's mind raced as he considered Rhea's proposition. The fate of Harmony Station hung in the balance, and every second counted. With a deep breath, he made his decision. "All right, Rhea, tell me what you know, but we'll discuss your other offer later. Right now, we need to focus on saving lives." Rhea nodded, her expression shifting from seductive to serious. The Orion Liberation Front has been planning this attack for months. They've infiltrated the station's security systems and have operatives in key positions. Their leader, Commander Zex, is my cousin. Matthew's eyes widened at this revelation, but before he could respond, a group of panicked civilians came rushing down the corridor. Without hesitation, he took charge. "Everyone, stay calm," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Head to emergency shelter B3. It's the closest and most secure location." As the civilians hurried past, Matthew pulled aside a trembling Andorian engineer. "What's the situation at the command center?" The engineer's antennae quivered as he spoke. "It's bad, sir. The rebels have taken control. They've got hostages. Matthew's eyes hardened. Thank you. Get to safety. With Rhea close behind, Matthew pressed on towards the command center. The corridors were a maze of flashing red lights and blaring alarms. As they rounded the final corner, they came face to face with a tense standoff. Commander Jackson Steele, the station's burly security chief, stood with his phaser aimed at a group of heavily armed Orion rebels. Behind the rebels, Matthew could see several staff members, both human and alien, huddled together with fear etched on their faces. "Stand down," Commander Steele barked. "You're outnumbered and outgunned." The lead rebel, a muscular Orion male with intricate facial markings, sneered. "We have hostages, human. You're in no position to make demands." Matthew stepped forward, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I'm Matthew Henry, the human diplomatic liaison. Let's talk about this." The rebel leader's eyes narrowed. "Ah, the famous diplomat Henry. I am Crone, and I speak for the Orion Liberation Front. We have no interest in your human platitudes." Rhea suddenly gripped Matthew's arm, her voice a whisper. "Matthew, the female rebel to Crone's left. That's Zara, my sister." Matthew's mind whirled with this new information. He studied the female rebel, noting the family resemblance to Rhea. Zara's posture was tense, her eyes darting between Crone and the hostages. "Crone," Matthew said, his voice steady and calm, "I understand you have demands. Why don't we discuss them? Surely we can find a peaceful resolution that benefits everyone." Crone laughed harshly. "Peaceful? Your kind speaks of peace while you strangle our people with unfair trade agreements and military occupation. No, human. We demand that you relinquish control of the Orion trade routes and withdraw your forces from our territory." As Crone spoke, Matthew noticed Rhea inching forward. Before he could stop her, she called out, "Take me instead." All eyes turned to Rhea. Crone's brow furrowed in confusion, while Zara's eyes widened in recognition. "I offer myself as a hostage," Rhea continued, her voice trembling slightly. "In exchange, release some of the others." Matthew watched in awe as Rhea's selfless act momentarily threw the rebels off balance. Crone considered for a moment, then nodded. "Very well. We'll release half the hostages, but you and the diplomat stay with us." As the freed hostages scrambled to safety, Matthew found himself being roughly shoved into a nearby storage room along with Rhea. The door hissed shut behind them, leaving them in dim emergency lighting. "That was incredibly brave," Matthew said softly, studying Rhea with new eyes. "And incredibly foolish. Are you all right?" Rhea nodded, sinking to the floor. "I'm fine. I couldn't stand by and do nothing." As the adrenaline of the confrontation wore off, Matthew became acutely aware of their close proximity in the small room. He sat down next to Rhea, their shoulders almost touching. "Tell me about your sister," he prompted gently. Rhea sighed, her green skin shimmering in the low light. "Zara and we grew up in a culture that values strength and dominance. She chose to fight against it, while I thought I could change things from within by serving." As Rhea spoke, Matthew found himself captivated by her intelligence and depth. The subservient persona she had initially presented was falling away, revealing a complex individual shaped by her culture and experiences. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of shouting outside. Matthew pressed his ear to the door, straining to hear. "It sounds like they're arguing," he whispered. "This could be our chance." Rhea nodded, her eyes gleaming with drive. "I can help. I know Orion body language, the subtleties in their speech. If we can exploit their divisions..." Matthew felt a plan forming in his mind. As he turned to Rhea to discuss it, he was struck by the intensity in her gaze. The attraction he had initially dismissed now seemed to crackle between them, adding another layer of complexity to their already precarious situation. "All right," he said, pushing aside his growing feelings. "Let's figure out how to end this and save Harmony Station. Together." As they huddled close, whispering plans and strategies, neither of them noticed the faint sounds of movement in the air ducts above. The young ensign Alex Cooper, crawling through the maintenance system on a mission that could tip the scales in this interstellar crisis. As Matthew and Rhea huddled together in the dimly lit storage room, The sounds of heated argument outside grew louder. Matthew pressed his ear against the cool metal door, straining to make out the words. "It's getting worse out there," he whispered, turning back to Rhea. "We need to act fast." Rhea nodded, her green skin shimmering in the low light. "I can help. I know Orion body language, the subtleties in their speech. If we can exploit their divisions—" Matthew felt a plan forming in his mind. As he turned to Rhea to discuss it, he was struck by the intensity in her gaze. The attraction he had initially dismissed now seemed to crackle between them, adding another layer of complexity to their already precarious situation. "All right," he said, pushing aside his growing feelings. "Let's figure out how to end this and save Harmony Station. Together." As they huddled close, whispering plans and strategies, Matthew reached down and carefully removed a small communication device hidden in the heel of his boot. Rhea's eyes widened in surprise. "Standard precaution for human diplomats," Matthew explained with a wry smile. He quickly established a secure connection with Commander Steele, who had regrouped with the station's security forces. "Steele, it's Henry. Listen carefully." Matthew spoke in hushed tones, relaying crucial information about the rebels' positions and internal conflicts. He could hear the commander's grunt of acknowledgement as the information was processed. Meanwhile, Rhea began to open up about her past and her relationship with Zara. "We grew up together, but our paths diverged," she explained, her voice tinged with sadness. "I chose a life of service, believing I could change things from within. Zara, she saw rebellion as the only way forward." Matthew listened intently, recognizing the valuable insights this information provided. The cultural schism within Orion society that Rhea described could be the key to manipulating the situation in their favor. As the night cycle progressed, the argument outside reached a fever pitch. Matthew and Rhea could clearly hear Zara's voice, advocating for a more moderate approach, while Crone's gruff tones insisted on maintaining their hardline stance. "This is our chance," Matthew whispered, his heart racing. He called out to their guard, his voice steady and authoritative. "I can help mediate this dispute. Let me speak with your leaders." There was a moment of tense silence before the door slid open. Matthew stepped out, Rhea close behind him. They found themselves face to face with Crone and Zara, both looking agitated and sleep-deprived. Matthew took a deep breath, calling upon years of diplomatic training. He addressed Crone first, his tone respectful yet firm. "Commander, I understand your frustration with the current state of Orion human relations. A peaceful resolution here could position you as a powerful voice in future negotiations." Crone's eyes narrowed, but Matthew could see a glimmer of interest. He then turned to Zara, his voice softening slightly. "And you, Zara, your concerns about the well-being of your people are valid. There's an opportunity here to open a dialogue, to address these issues without further bloodshed." As Matthew spoke, Rhea watched the subtle shifts in body language between the two Orion leaders. She leaned in close, whispering observations that Matthew seamlessly incorporated into his arguments. The rebels were so engrossed in the impromptu negotiation that they failed to notice the faint sounds coming from the maintenance ducts above. Ensign Alex Cooper, who had been gathering intelligence, seized the opportunity to disable the command center's security systems. Suddenly, alarms blared and the lights flickered. Commander Steele's voice boomed over the station's communication system. "This is your last chance to surrender peacefully." Chaos erupted as Steele's security team launched a coordinated assault from multiple entry points. Matthew instinctively grabbed Rhea, pulling her behind an overturned console for cover. Their bodies pressed close together in the confined space, the physical proximity intensifying the growing attraction between them. Amidst the firefight, Matthew saw Zara hesitate, her eyes darting between Crone and the advancing security forces. In that moment of indecision, Matthew called out to her, "Zara, help us end this without more violence." Zara locked eyes with Rhea, an unspoken communication passing between the sisters. With a swift motion, Zara turned and tackled Crone, pinning the surprised rebel leader to the ground. The remaining rebels, seeing their leader subdued, quickly lost their dedication. Within minutes, Steele's forces had regained control of the command center. As the dust settled, Matthew helped Rhea to her feet, their hands lingering together a moment longer than necessary. Commander Steele approached, a rare smile on his gruff face. "Damn fine work, Henry." "You too, miss," he added, nodding to Rhea. As the adrenaline of the confrontation began to fade, Matthew found his thoughts increasingly occupied by Rhea. Her bravery and intelligence during the ordeal had left a lasting impression, and he could feel the professional barriers between them continuing to erode. Rhea caught his gaze, a mix of emotions playing across her features. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Before Matthew could respond, a junior officer approached. "Sir, the station admiral requests your presence. They're preparing to begin negotiations with the moderate Orion factions." Matthew nodded, his mind already racing with the diplomatic challenges ahead. He turned back to Rhea, feeling a new weight to his words. "It seems we have a lot of work ahead of us, together." "We have a lot of work ahead of us," Matthew said, his voice tinged with both exhaustion and willpower. As the adrenaline of the crisis faded, the true magnitude of the situation began to sink in. The command center, once a pristine hub of activity, now bore the scars of the recent conflict. Scorch marks marred the walls, and the acrid smell of weapons fire lingered in the air. Matthew found himself thrust into the center of a diplomatic maelstrom. The station admiral, recognizing his pivotal role in diffusing the hostage situation, appointed him as the lead negotiator between the station authorities and the moderate Orion factions. Days blurred into nights as Matthew immersed himself in his new responsibilities. The command center became his second home, a place where tense negotiations unfolded against the backdrop of hastily repaired consoles and makeshift workstations. Rhea, now officially assigned as Matthew's cultural liaison, became an indispensable part of his daily routine. Her insights into Orion social hierarchies and nonverbal cues proved crucial in navigating the complex web of Orion politics. One evening, as they pored over Orion cultural texts, Matthew glanced up to find Rhea studying him intently. The dim light of the command center cast a soft glow on her green skin, highlighting the perseverance in her eyes. "You look exhausted," she said softly, her hand hovering near his for a moment before pulling back. Matthew ran a hand through his disheveled hair. "I am," he admitted. "But we're making progress, slowly but surely." Rhea nodded, her expression a mixture of concern and admiration. "Your dedication is impressive," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment was interrupted by the arrival of Commander Steele, his face grim. "Henry, we need to talk about Zara." Matthew straightened, his fatigue momentarily forgotten. Zara's presence on the station had created a new set of challenges. Held in a secure area, she had become a valuable source of intelligence on the rebel faction. "What's the situation?" Matthew asked, following Steele to a private conference room. Steele activated a security field before speaking. "She's offering to cooperate, but she's demanding to speak with you personally." Matthew nodded, his mind already racing with the potential implications. "Set it up, and make sure Rhea is present. We'll need her insights." The debriefing sessions with Zara became a regular part of Matthew's routine. Each meeting, conducted under tight security, revealed a complex web of grievances and aspirations within Orion society. During one such session, Zara leaned forward, her eyes intense. "You don't understand," she said, her voice low. "The current system is unsustainable. Change must come, one way or another." Matthew listened intently, recognizing the passion in her words. It was during these moments that an idea began to form in his mind, a bold initiative that could potentially bridge the gap between humans and Orions. As negotiations progressed, Matthew proposed a cultural exchange program. "This isn't just about politics," he argued during a particularly heated meeting with station leadership. "It's about fostering understanding at a fundamental level." The proposal gained traction among both human and Orion moderates, but faced opposition from hardliners on both sides. Matthew found himself navigating an increasingly complex political landscape, with Rhea as his constant companion and guide. One night, as they worked late in Matthew's office, Rhea made an announcement that caught him off guard. "I want to volunteer for the exchange program," she said, her voice filled with persistence. Matthew looked up from his datapad, surprised. "Are you sure? It could be dangerous, And you've already done so much. Rhea stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. I believe in what we're doing here, Matthew. I want to be part of it. Fully. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotions. Matthew found himself acutely aware of Rhea's proximity, of the subtle scent of her skin. He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by an urgent communication from the station's chief medical officer, Dr. Elena Rodriguez. Mr. Henry, I need to see you immediately, Dr. Rodriguez's voice came through the comm system. It's about the physiological compatibility between humans and Orions. We may have a situation. As Matthew acknowledged the message, he caught a flicker of concern in Rhea's eyes. The complexities of their situation, personal, professional, and now potentially medical, seemed to grow with each passing moment. With a deep breath, Matthew steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The fragile peace they had worked so hard to establish hung in the balance, and he knew that the coming days would test him like never before. As he prepared to meet with Dr. Rodriguez, Matthew cast one last glance at Rhea. The unspoken connection between them had grown stronger through their shared experiences, but he couldn't shake the feeling that their biggest challenges, both personal and diplomatic, were still to come. Matthew's meeting with Dr. Rodriguez revealed unexpected complications in human Orion physiology, but before he could fully process the implications, a new challenge emerged that would test the fragile peace they had worked so hard to establish. The arrival of Admiral Jonathan Graves on Harmony Station sent shockwaves through the diplomatic community. His imposing figure strode into the command center, flanked by a retinue of stern-faced aides. The atmosphere in the room instantly shifted, tension crackling in the air like static electricity. Mr. Henry, Admiral Graves' voice boomed across the room, his resolute expression fixed on Matthew. I've reviewed your reports. While I appreciate your efforts, I find your approach lacking in decisiveness. Matthew straightened his posture, acutely aware of Rhea's presence beside him. Admiral, I believe our current strategy has shown promising results. Results? Graves cut him off, his tone dismissive. What I see is a station in disarray and a rebel faction awe-inspiring. It's time for a firmer hand. Over the next few days, Admiral Graves systematically dismantled much of the progress Matthew and Rhea had made. The cultural exchange program, once a beacon of hope for improved relations, now teetered on the brink of cancellation. Matthew found himself caught in an impossible position. His loyalty to the chain of command clashed violently with his conviction that Graves's hardline approach would only exacerbate tensions. Late one night, as he pored over reports in his office, Rhea entered, her face etched with concern. Matthew, I've uncovered something, she said, her voice low. There's a network of human extremists operating within the station. They fear closer ties with Orions will threaten their way of life. Matthew's eyes widened as he absorbed the information. This could explain the increased resistance we've been facing. Have you told the Admiral? Rhea shook her head. I don't think that would be wise. His approach might push them to take drastic action. After a moment of contemplation, Matthew nodded. You're right. We'll keep this between us for now and try to address their concerns through the exchange program. Despite Admiral Graves's reservations, the first wave of the cultural exchange program moved forward. The night before Rhea's scheduled departure for Earth, she and Matthew found themselves alone in his quarters, the weight of unspoken emotions hanging between them. I'm not sure I can do this without you, Matthew admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Rhea stepped closer, her hand brushing against his. You can. You must. The tension between them finally broke. Their lips met in a passionate kiss, years of pent-up attraction and shared experiences, culminating in this moment. But just as Matthew's hands began to explore the unfamiliar contours of Rhea's body, a harsh buzz from the comm system shattered the moment. Commander Steele's voice crackled through the speaker. Henry, we have a situation. Multiple sabotage attempts reported across the station. Get to the command center immediately. Matthew and Rhea exchanged a look of alarm before rushing out the door. When they arrived at the command center, they found Admiral Graves already there, barking orders to a team of frantic officers. Life support systems are failing in sectors 3 through 7, an ensign reported, her voice strained. Backup systems are not responding. Matthew's mind raced, connecting the dots between Rhea's intelligence and the current crisis. He stepped forward, addressing the Admiral directly. Sir, I believe I know who's behind this. Let me lead a team to confront them directly. Graves turned, his eyes narrowing. And how exactly do you come by this information, Mr. Henry? Matthew hesitated for a split second before revealing the extent of his and Rhea's covert investigation. The Admiral's face darkened with anger, but as the severity of the situation became clear, he grudgingly gave his approval. You have 1 hour, Henry. After that, I'm initiating full lockdown procedures. Matthew nodded, already assembling his team. With Rhea by his side and a small security detail, they made their way to a seldom-used section of the station. The corridors here were dimly lit, emergency power creating eerie shadows that danced along the walls. They found the Extremists holed up in an old maintenance bay. Their leader, a man Matthew recognized as Victor Crane, a former station engineer, stood at the forefront, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and willpower. That's far enough, Crane called out, raising a makeshift energy weapon. We won't let you destroy everything we've built here. Matthew raised his hands, his voice calm and steady. We're not here to destroy anything, Victor. We want to understand your concerns and find a solution that works for everyone. As Matthew engaged Crane in tense negotiations, Rhea's keen eyes scanned the room. She noticed one of Crane's associates slowly reaching for something hidden beneath a console. Without hesitation, she launched herself at the man, tackling him to the ground. The object clattered across the floor. A dead man's switch connected to explosives scattered throughout the station. Matthew's heart raced as he realized how close they had come to catastrophe. He quickly stepped in, using every ounce of his diplomatic training to defuse the situation. Victor, listen to me, Matthew said, his voice firm but empathetic. I know you're scared. Change is always frightening, but destroying the station isn't the answer. Let us work together to address your concerns, to find a way forward that respects both human and Orion cultures. For a long moment, the fate of Harmony Station hung in the balance. Then slowly, Crane lowered his weapon. How can we trust you? He asked, his voice heavy with doubt. Matthew glanced at Rhea, drawing strength from her presence. Because we're all in this together. Human, Orion. We're all part of something bigger now. Let's build that future together, not tear it apart. As Crane and his followers surrendered, Matthew knew that this was just the beginning. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with difficult conversations and hard-won compromises. But as he looked at Rhea, he felt a glimmer of hope. Together, they had taken the first step towards true understanding between their peoples. The crisis averted, Matthew and Rhea made their way back to the command center, knowing that their work was just getting started. Admiral Graves would need to be briefed, the cultural exchange program re-evaluated, and the deeper conspiracy Zara had hinted at investigated. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet victory, their hands brushing together as they walked side by side towards an uncertain but hopeful future. Future. As Matthew and Rhea made their way back to the command center, the gravity of recent events took a toll upon them. The averted crisis with Victor Crane and his extremist group had exposed a vulnerability in Harmony Station's security, one that couldn't be ignored. Admiral Graves was waiting for them, his stern face betraying a mix of frustration and grudging respect. Henry, Rhea, he acknowledged as they entered. Your actions today may have saved this station, but they've also revealed a more complex problem. Matthew nodded, exchanging a glance with Rhea. Sir, we believe there's a larger conspiracy at play here, one that involves both human and Orion factions. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Explain. Over the next hour, Matthew and Rhea detailed their findings, from Zara's cryptic warnings to the intelligence Rhea had gathered on human extremists. As they spoke, the enormity of the situation became clear. Graves paced the room, his brow furrowed in thought. Finally, he turned to face them. This goes beyond anything we anticipated. We need to get to the bottom of this, and fast. He paused, studying them both. I'm assigning you two to lead a covert investigation into this conspiracy. Matthew blinked in surprise. Sir, what about the cultural exchange program? It'll have to wait, Graves replied firmly. This takes priority. Your combined expertise makes you uniquely qualified for this task. As they left the Admiral's office, Rhea touched Matthew's arm. I know you're disappointed about the exchange program, she said softly. Matthew nodded, feeling a mix of emotions. It was an important step, but you're right, this is crucial. Over the next few days, Matthew and Rhea threw themselves into their new assignment. They pored over station logs, communication records, and security footage, searching for any clues that might lead them to the heart of the conspiracy. It was during one of these late-night sessions that they made a breakthrough. Rhea, her eyes red-rimmed from hours of staring at screens, suddenly sat up straight. Matthew, look at this, she called, her voice tight with excitement. Matthew leaned over her shoulder, his proximity sending a shiver down her spine. On the screen was a series of seemingly innocuous maintenance requests, but there was a pattern to them, a hidden rhythm that didn't match normal station operations. It's a code, Matthew breathed, his mind racing. These aren't maintenance requests at all. They're messages. Working together, they began to decode the hidden communications. What emerged was chilling, evidence of a group calling itself the Cosmic Purity Front, or CPF. This shadowy organization seemed to have tendrils reaching into both human and Orion societies, united by a shared hatred of interspecies cooperation. As they delved deeper into the encrypted messages, the boundaries between professional collaboration and personal attraction began to blur. The late nights, shared victories, and mounting tension created an electric atmosphere between them. One night, as they huddled over a particularly challenging piece of code, Matthew became acutely aware of Rhea's proximity. The subtle scent of her skin, the warmth radiating from her body. It was intoxicating. Without thinking, he turned his head, finding her face mere inches from his own. Time seemed to stand still as they gazed at each other, years of unspoken desire bubbling to the surface. Slowly, inevitably, they leaned towards each other. Just as their lips were about to meet, a harsh alarm blared through the office. They jumped apart, hearts racing for more reasons than one. Commander Steele's voice crackled over the comm system. Henry, Rhea, we have a situation. Multiple unauthorized access attempts detected at the central computer core. I need you here now. Exchanging a look of mingled frustration and drive, Matthew and Rhea sprang into action. As they raced through the station's corridors, Matthew's mind whirled. The computer core. That must be what those encrypted messages were about. The CPF is making their move. Rhea nodded grimly. If they gain control of the core, they could cripple the entire station. They burst into the security center, where Commander Steele was coordinating a response team. We've identified the intruders, he reported tersely. They're disguised as maintenance workers, but facial recognition confirms they're not station personnel. Matthew's eyes narrowed. How many? At least 6, possibly more. Rhea stepped forward, her posture shifting subtly into a combat-ready stance that Matthew had never seen before. We need to move fast. I can lead a team to flank them while Matthew coordinates from here. Matthew blinked in surprise at Rhea's sudden display of tactical knowledge, but there was no time to question it. He nodded, quickly outlining a plan of attack. As Rhea moved out with a security team, Matthew turned his attention to the station's systems. Using his deep knowledge of Harmony's layout, he began to manipulate environmental controls and security protocols, creating obstacles for the intruders while clearing a path for Rhea's team. Through the comm system, Matthew heard the sounds of conflict erupting near the computer core. Rhea's voice came through, tense but controlled. We've engaged the enemy. They're well-armed and trained. This won't be easy. Matthew's fingers flew over the control panels, his mind racing to stay one step ahead of the CPF operatives. Understood. I'm sealing off their escape routes now. As the battle raged, Matthew found himself both awed and unsettled by Rhea's combat prowess. The elegant diplomat he knew had transformed into a skilled warrior, her movements precise and lethal. Suddenly, an idea struck him. Rhea, I have a plan, but it's risky. What do you need? She replied without hesitation. I'm going to use myself as bait. Draw them out so you can flank them. There was a pause, then a terse, understood. Be careful. Matthew took a deep breath. then stepped out into the corridor leading to the computer core. "Hey!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the metal walls. "Looking for me?" The response was immediate. Energy blasts scorched the air around him as he ducked and weaved, leading the CPF operatives away from their objective. His heart pounded in his ears as he narrowly avoided the deadly fire. Just when he thought he couldn't keep it up any longer, he heard Ria's voice ring out. "Now!" A flurry of stun blasts filled the corridor. Matthew felt a searing pain in his arm as one of the enemy's shots grazed him. But then it was over. The CPF operatives lay unconscious on the ground, surrounded by Ria's team. As the adrenaline faded, Matthew sagged against the wall, clutching his injured arm. Ria was at his side in an instant, her eyes filled with a mix of concern and something deeper. "You're hurt," she said softly, examining the wound. Matthew managed a weak smile. "Just a scratch, nothing compared to your hidden talents. Where did you learn to fight like that?" Ria's expression grew distant for a moment. "There's a lot about my past. You don't know, Matthew, but I promise, I'll tell you everything when this is over." Before Matthew could respond, Commander Steele approached. "We've secured the prisoners and locked down the computer core. But this isn't over. We need to question them, find out how deep this conspiracy goes." Matthew nodded, straightening up despite the pain in his arm. "Agreed, and we need to brief Admiral Graves immediately. This attack changes everything." As they made their way to the Admiral's office, Matthew felt Ria's hand brush against his. The touch was brief, but it carried a wealth of unspoken emotion. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew they would face them together. The door to Admiral Graves' office loomed before them, a threshold to a new chapter in their mission. Matthew took a deep breath, recognizing that the fate of Harmony Station, and perhaps the future of human-Orion relations, now rested in their hands. Hands. Nodding to each other, they pushed open the door and stepped inside. Admiral Graves looked up from his desk, his face a mask of concern. "Henry, Ria, what's the situation?" Before Matthew could speak, alarms blared throughout the station. Commander Steele's voice crackled over the intercom. "All personnel, this is not a drill. We have confirmed reports of an imminent large-scale attack by the Cosmic Purity Front. Initiate Emergency Protocol Omega-7. The room erupted into action. Admiral Graves was on his feet in an instant, barking orders into his comm unit. Matthew and Ria exchanged a glance, their earlier moment of intimacy pushed aside by the urgency of the situation. "Sir," Matthew said, stepping forward, "we need to act fast. I have a plan, but it's risky." Graves turned to him, eyebrow raised. "Let's hear it, Henry." Matthew took a deep breath. "We used the credentials we got from the captured CPF operative to infiltrate their fleet. If we can disable their leadership, we might be able to throw their entire attack into disarray." The Admiral's eyes narrowed. "That's more than risky, Henry. It's damn near suicidal." "I'll go with him," Ria interjected, her voice firm. "My combat training and knowledge of Orion tactics could prove crucial." Graves looked between them, weighing the options. Finally, he nodded. "All right, you have my authorization. But for God's sake, be careful out there." As they rushed to prepare for the mission, the station was a flurry of activity. Security teams mobilized, non-essential personnel evacuated to secure areas. Matthew and Ria made their way to the medical bay, where Dr. Elena Rodriguez was waiting. "I've got something for you," she said, handing them each a small device. "Biomonitors. They'll track your vital signs during the mission. And these," she added, passing over 2 compact kits, "are emergency medical supplies designed for both human and Orion physiology." Matthew nodded his thanks, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety in his stomach. As they headed for the shuttle bay, he felt Ria's hand brush against his. "We can do this," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. The shuttle was small and nondescript, perfect for their covert mission. As they boarded, Matthew felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. If they failed, Harmony Station, and perhaps the future of human-Orion relations, would be in jeopardy. The launch sequence initiated, and Matthew's stomach lurched as they shot out into the vastness of space. Ria took the controls, her movements precise and confident. As the CPF fleet came into view, a tense silence fell over the cockpit. Ready? Rhea asked, her finger hovering over the comm unit. Matthew nodded, swallowing hard. Let's do this. Rhea transmitted the stolen credentials, and they held their breath. Seconds ticked by like hours until finally, a gruff voice came through. Shuttle X-17, you are cleared for docking in Bay 4. They exchanged a look of relief as Rhea guided the shuttle towards the massive command ship. As they touched down in the docking bay, Matthew's heart raced. This was it. No turning back now. They moved through the corridors of the CPF ship, every step fraught with danger. Matthew's diplomatic instincts served him well, allowing him to bluff their way past several checkpoints. Rhea's combat awareness kept them out of sight when stealth was needed. As they neared the command center, alarms suddenly blared. Intruder alert! All personnel to battle stations! So much for the element of surprise, Matthew muttered. Rhea's response was to draw her weapon. Then we do this the hard way. They burst into the command center, catching the CPF officers off guard. But as they secured the room, Matthew found himself face to face with the last person he expected to see. Ambassador Kroll, he gasped, recognizing the high-ranking Orion official who had been instrumental in recent peace talks. The Orion's face twisted into a sneer. Ah, Mr. Henry, I should have known you'd be the one to complicate things. Rhea stepped forward, her weapon trained on Kroll. Why? She demanded. You were supposed to be one of us, working for peace. Peace? Kroll spat the word. What you call peace, I call the dilution of our species. The CPF understands the truth, that we must remain pure to remain strong. Matthew's mind raced. They needed to alert Harmony Station, to transmit the fleet's battle plans. He caught Rhea's eye, tilting his head slightly towards the main console. Understanding flashed across her face. As Matthew engaged Kroll in debate, drawing the attention of the room, Rhea slowly edged towards the console. Think about what you're doing, Ambassador, Matthew said, his voice calm despite the tension thrumming through his body. This attack won't just cost lives. It'll destroy any hope of true understanding between our peoples. Kroll laughed bitterly. Understanding? You humans understand nothing. He was cut off by a shout from one of his officers. Sir, they're transmitting our plans to Harmony Station. Chaos erupted. Matthew dove for cover as energy blasts scorched the air around him. He caught a glimpse of Rhea, her face set in relentless drive as she finished the transmission. Time to go, she shouted, laying down covering fire as Matthew scrambled to his feet. They fought their way out of the command center, the sound of alarms and shouting filling the air. Matthew's diplomatic skills were useless now. He relied on Rhea's combat expertise as they navigated the suddenly hostile ship. The hangar bay, Rhea gasped as they rounded a corner. If we can steal a fighter, we might have a chance. They burst into the hangar, immediately drawing fire from the CPF personnel. Rhea returned fire, creating a path for them to reach the nearest fighter. Matthew clambered into the cockpit, his hands flying over unfamiliar controls. Any idea how to fly this thing? He asked as Rhea joined him. She grinned, a fierce light in her eyes. Watch and learn, diplomat. The fighter roared to life, shooting out of the hangar bay and into the chaos of the battle that had erupted around them. Matthew manned the weapon systems, his heart pounding as he tried to keep the pursuing CPF ships at bay. Through the view screen, he caught glimpses of the larger battle. Harmony Station's defense fleet, a mix of human and Orion ships, was engaging the CPF forces. Thanks to their transmitted intel, the defenders had managed to catch the attackers off guard. We did it, Matthew breathed, allowing himself a moment of hope. But their victory was short-lived. A direct hit rocked their small craft, sending warning lights flashing across the console. We're losing life support, Rhea reported, her voice tight. And our engines are failing. As the fighter drifted, powerless, Matthew felt a strange calm settle over him. He turned to Rhea, taking in her features as if for the first time. Rhea, She silenced him with a look, reaching out to take his hand. I know, she said softly. Me too. As they floated in the vastness of space, their eyes locked, neither willing to look away. The battle raged around them, but in that moment, it all faded away. Suddenly, a new voice crackled over their comm system. This is Zara, leading the joint rescue team. Hold on, we're coming for you. Matthew and Rhea exchanged a look of disbelief as a ship appeared beside them, extending a docking tube. As they were pulled to safety, they watched through the view screen as the CPF fleet began to retreat, their attack thwarted by the united efforts of Harmony Station's defenders. Boarding the rescue ship, exhausted but alive, Matthew and Rhea found themselves face to face with a grinning Zara. "Looks like you two had quite the adventure," she said, her eyes twinkling. Before either could respond, the ship's captain approached. "We're heading back to Harmony Station," he reported, "and it seems you're both wanted in the Admiral's office immediately upon arrival." As the rescue ship set course for home, Matthew and Rhea sat side by side, their shoulders touching. The adrenaline of their mission was fading, replaced by a mix of relief and anticipation. They had survived against adversity, but they both knew that their journey, both personal and professional, was far from finished. The familiar shape of Harmony Station grew larger in the view screen, a beacon of hope in the vastness of space. As they prepared for docking, Matthew turned to Rhea. "Ready for whatever comes next?" he asked quietly. She nodded, a small smile playing at her lips. "As long as we face it together." The docking procedure began, marking the end of one chapter and the beginning of another in their shared story. As the rescue ship docked with Harmony Station, Matthew and Rhea exchanged a look of perseverance. The familiar hum of the station's systems surrounded them as they disembarked, their bodies aching from the recent ordeal, but their spirits unbroken. Admiral Graves was waiting for them in the docking bay, his face a mix of relief and urgency. "Henry, Rhea, thank God you're both all right. We need to debrief immediately. The situation has escalated beyond our worst predictions." They followed the Admiral through the bustling corridors of the station. Everywhere they looked, humans and Orions were working side by side, the recent attack having galvanized a sense of unity among the station's inhabitants. In the Admiral's office, they found a gathering of high-ranking officials from both species. The tension in the room was palpable as Matthew and Rhea took their seats at the large conference table. "What you've uncovered about the Cosmic Purity Front changes everything," Admiral Graves began, his voice grave. "We need a full report on what you've learned, and we need it now." Matthew leaned forward, his diplomatic training kicking in despite his exhaustion. "The CPF's reach is far greater than we initially thought. They've infiltrated key positions in both human and Orion hierarchies. Ambassador Kroll's involvement is just the tip of the iceberg." Rhea nodded, adding, "Their goal isn't just to disrupt our relations. They aim to completely sever all ties between our species, believing that isolation is the only way to preserve what they call racial purity." As they delved into the details of their mission, the room fell silent. The implications of their report were staggering, highlighting the fragility of the peace they had worked so hard to build. When they finished, Admiral Graves stood, his face set with tenacity. "We need to act quickly and decisively. Matthew, Rhea, your unique insights and experiences make you invaluable in crafting our response. I'm appointing you both to lead a special task force to address this threat." In the days that followed, Matthew and Rhea threw themselves into their new roles. They worked tirelessly, often late into the night, developing strategies to counter the CPF's influence and strengthen the bonds between humans and Orions. One evening, as they pored over reports in Matthew's quarters, Rhea paused, looking up at him with a mix of exhaustion and willpower. "We need to do more than just react to their moves. We need to change the game entirely." Matthew nodded, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "You're right. We need to show everyone what true cooperation between our species can achieve." Their conversation sparked a flurry of new initiatives. They proposed joint human-Orion task forces for everything from scientific research to peacekeeping operations. Cultural exchange programs were expanded, and new educational curricula were developed to foster greater understanding between the two species. As weeks turned into months, Harmony Station began to transform. The sight of humans and Orions working side by side became commonplace. In the station's central plaza, a new sculpture was unveiled, symbolizing the intertwining of the two cultures. Matthew and Rhea's influence extended beyond the station. They embarked on a series of diplomatic missions to both human and Orion worlds, sharing their experiences and the lessons learned from the CPF crisis. Their partnership, both professional and personal, became a powerful symbol of what could be achieved through cooperation. During a particularly tense negotiation on an Orion colony world, Matthew found himself facing a hostile crowd. As he struggled to make his point, Rhea stepped forward, her presence commanding attention. "I understand your fears," she said, her voice carrying across the packed assembly hall. "I once shared them, but I've seen firsthand the strength that comes from our unity. Together, we are more than the sum of our parts." Her words, bridging the gap between the two cultures, turned the tide of the negotiation. As they left the hall, Matthew squeezed her hand, a gesture of gratitude and affection that spoke volumes. Returning to Harmony Station, they found themselves at the center of a growing movement. Their work had inspired others to reach across the divide between species, forging new friendships and partnerships. In a quiet moment, standing before the viewport in Matthew's quarters, Rhea turned to him. "We've come so far," she said softly, "but there's still so much to do." Matthew nodded, drawing her close. "Together," he said, "we can face anything." As they stood there, the stars stretching out before them, they knew that their journey was just the beginning. The challenges ahead were daunting, but in each other, they had found the strength to persevere. Their shared commitment to peace and understanding would light the way forward, not just for themselves, but for both their species. The comm unit chimed, interrupting their moment of reflection. Admiral Graves's voice came through, urgent and clear. "Matthew, Rhea, we need you in the command center immediately. We've just received a transmission from the outer colonies. It seems the CPF is on the move again." Exchanging a determined look, Matthew and Rhea headed for the door. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it as they had faced every challenge since their paths first crossed, side by side, united in purpose and in heart.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.